this time, we're taking a look at a classic reboot, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And along the way, we ask, how has Andy Serkis never won an Oscar? Is this movie really just a long vacation for California? And just how plausible is a cure for Alzheimer's? Take your stinking paw off me, you dirty damn podcast. This is Force-Fed Sci-Fi. All right, guys. Welcome back. Welcome back to another awesome, bodacious episode of Force-Fed Sci-Fi. My name is Sean Michael Culp, and along with me is my friend and co-host.
I am Chris Rupp.
Hey, Mr. Chris Rupp. How are you doing, man?
I am doing great. I am so pumped to be talking about Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think one of a few prime examples of truly great science fiction that we've gotten over the last 15 years or so.
You think so? Really? That is a hefty claim to heap on this movie, man.
Well, I think the original Planet of the Apes, just the franchise itself, is so ubiquitous in the cultural lexicon. People know what it's about. The original with Charlton Heston, astronaut manages to go forward in time, and then there's the great quote, "Take your stinking paw off me," all the great imagery, and then that ending with the classic, "You blew it up, you maniacs." That ending is just that. I think that ending lives rent free in the minds of most sci-fi fans, and it's just. And I don't know about you, but I was just initially skeptical of this movie. Now 10 years ago, and it blew me away at the time, and it was great to revisit it for today's episode.
I'm still just blown away that you said ubiquitous of the cultural lexicon. My mind just can't even handle that wordplay.
We'll call it, it's a big word podcast. Our new Sean and I's new podcast. We're defining big words for everybody.
All right. So how about you define the synopsis for us, my good sir?
All right. So when scientist Will Rodman fails to develop a cure for Alzheimer's, his experiments affect a young chimp named Caesar in a profound way. And as Caesar's world is uprooted, his increased intelligence will prove to be a danger to humanity.
Wow. That's good. Oh, Caesar. Do you know how they actually got the name Caesar before we jump into the cast and crew?
I actually watched. I have the Blu-ray, so I was able to watch this at home. So I watched a lot of the making of, behind the scenes things that they had for the special features. And the screenwriters, Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, they actually worked backwards from the original Planet of the Apes film. And there's a moment in the film where they talk about the first ape was named Caesar, and the first word uttered was no. So and they talked about how the entire movie they were writing was just building to that moment where Caesar is standing over Dodge and he yells, "No!"
Yeah, that's a moment. That's a really good moment in this. And I think you're right. This film does build to that moment. Very cool. Very cool tidbits. So who is in this film? It is directed by Rupert Wyatt. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't know anything about Rupert. Do you?
Yeah, I don't either. This is actually only his second film that he helmed in a director's chair. His first film, called The Escapist, apparently it was the darling of the Sundance Film Festival in 2008. And if you have a film that's just, everywhere in Sundance, odds are you're going to be, picked up to direct some blockbuster or some big budget movie at somewhere down the line.
Yeah, you're right, because Sundance is kind of like that festival where bougie would be a term used. With, I'm at Sundance Theater, like the festivals, which I think if you can make it, though, that's pretty damn good.
Oh, yeah, it's no small feat into getting into the Sundance Film Festival, but I always imagined it as the episode of Entourage where the crew goes to Sundance and all they do is try to snowboard and nail chicks.
What? God, I gotta watch that TV series. That sounds amazing.
Oh man, it's so dated because the first two seasons take place in 2004, 2005. So it is. Oh man, it is steeped in so much datedness. It's not even funny.
Perfect. Even better for us, I guess now, old timers. So Caesar in this film is motion captured by Andy Serkis, right?
Yeah,
like
and
Andy Serkis kind of helmed him.
Yeah, Andy Serkis is really definitely kind of a pioneer of this performance capture medium, I guess, for lack of a better word, because I think he really pioneered the technology when he was Gollum in the Lord of the Rings series, and now obviously Caesar, and now we're able to kind of recognize just how good he was as Gollum and as Caesar, and this has just led to an entire trend of actors performing, not so much seeing them on screen, because there's been so, like, now this technology is all over video games. Like they'll hire actors to do the performance capture and overlay a different face on them, and it's totally changed how actors actually do their jobs.
Oh, it's wonderful, actually. And Marvel, the cinematic universe, has totally grown from that. I mean, freaking Hulk is done, by motion capture. Ultron himself, by James Spader. Like, that's all his body movements. I mean, the film industry, we can thank Mr. Andy Serkis for, like, basically taking this into that level. And he's so damn good. Such a damn good actor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hands down, one of the best we've seen. And criminally underrated, I will add.
Yes, highly underrated. You know who was an actor that many people said was highly underrated and now maybe might be overrated is our guy James Franco, who played Will Rodman. Are you a Franco fan?
Not anymore, now that we know that he's a garbage human being, but I've had my suspicions about him for a while.
Your suspicions?
I mean, yeah. I mean, personally, like, he does these great movies. Like, he had like a 4 or 5 year stretch where every movie he was churning out was an absolute banger, and then he turns around and directs an adaptation of a Cormac McCarthy movie called Child of God, which was a total, like, dog pile of a movie. I can't even talk about just how bad it was. So he does 4 or 5 really great movies, and then he'll do 15 bad movies in a row. And then he does one good movie, and then people are like, oh, it's James Franco. He's always been good. Like, please, you wrote him off already 2 years ago. Let's not give more credit where credit isn't due.
Yeah, right. Because wasn't it like early 2000 or late 2000s, early 2010s? Franco was the man, but then he kind of became an enigma per se of himself. Like, he just took himself too seriously, and then after that, I mean, he just kind of fell. I think the last good film I've seen of his was like the one where it was not Seth MacFarlane, but Joe Rogan, Franco, and all their buddies, and they basically, the apocalypse happens, right? Did you ever see that? This Is the End?
I don't know. There's like 9 of those movies he's done.
Really? Are you serious?
Like a way too serious Adam Sandler. All James Franco does is make movies that he and his buddies, can just go hang out and do over a month or two.
God, what a man. What a man. Oh, I guess, if you want to make money with all your homies, that's the way to do it. But enough about this man. Who else is in this freaking movie?
All right, we've got Frida Pinto as Caroline. She's the veterinarian / Will's girlfriend that really kind of takes a backseat for most of the film. We've got
beautiful, though.
She is gorgeous, not gonna lie. We've got John Lithgow as Charles Rodman, Will's father, who is afflicted with Alzheimer's, and is just absolutely heartbreaking to watch his scenes at times.
Yeah.
We've got the great Brian Cox as John Landon, the head of the Apes sanctuary Caesar winds up in. Tom Felton of Harry Potter fame as Dodge Felton, the little pissant of a son who likes to beat up on innocent animals. And finally, we've got David Oyelowo as Stephen Jacobs, the CEO of Genesis.
Not a bad cast.
Great cast. I mean, Will is really kind of the thread that holds the movie together amongst all the characters, but all of the characters, I think, work independently of Will, and I think that's what makes them, you really hate them or you love them, and that's what makes it so great.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you there. But it's pretty tight. I think the cast is pretty tight knit, and everyone does a hell of a job acting wise. It didn't feel, or there's one guy that sucks. You're like, oh god, is this the Vin Diesel of the group or whoever? Insert crappy actor.
Yeah, nobody's terrible and everybody's great. It's always nice to see that. So, big time movie. There was a sizable budget that was committed to this movie right from the start. 20th Century Fox put in $93 million for this film, and I was not expecting to see a budget that big. But you could tell it's there. I mean, the budget is on screen.
It's nice. It's really nice.
And I don't know if you were able to pick this out too, but there were a lot of like references and Easter eggs that the screenwriters dropped in from the previous, from the original film. Like there, at one point, Caesar is holding like a model Statue of Liberty. Koba, the ape, near in the third act of the film, he's holding his arm out, similar to a human was in the original Planet of the Apes. Obviously, the motif of the apes riding on horseback, and this movie is just so steeped in Planet of the Apes lore. I mean, at times it's almost distracting to point it out and make a note of it.
I am gonna say this, but I've never actually seen the originals. My original Planet of the Apes that I've seen is the Tim Burton one from 2001.
Oh no.
So this was kind of like a first to me. I think I saw this in theaters like 10 years ago, and I don't know, I liked it, but I don't know, it was 10 years ago, and I was a different man. So the references to me, they went over my head.
All right, well, I mean, granted, it's been a minute since I watched the original, just because, I'm not the biggest Charlton Heston fan. I'm more of I'm a Kirk Douglas fan myself, if we're going to talk about classic Hollywood leading men. But that's just my own personal preference.
There's either Team Kirk or Team Charlton Heston.
Right.
I don't blame you there. I really don't blame you there. They're two polarizing individuals. But right on, brother. I'm glad that those Easter eggs like really popped out to you. I'm excited if the older one comes up then to revisit. So it will be dope as hell. But speaking of all those things, the Easter eggs, how did you think, like, production value and everything, the visual effects? What did you think of that with this film? Like, it's all the apes are, CGI essentially.
Yeah, there's no actual apes that are on set. It's all humans that are wearing like these tracking dots and in performance capture suits. And it is, I mean, I gotta say, even after 10 years, these visual effects hold up incredibly well. And maybe even better than some Marvel films that we're seeing now. It's amazing visual effects. You can tell a lot of work and a lot of attention was paid to how these apes look and how expressive they are, and it really comes through in the final product.
I will echo that. Those facial expressions that like Andy Serkis does, just perfect. I was floored by, I couldn't believe it when I saw that. I was like, 10 years ago, really? This is phenomenal, Like, and we're just going to get better and better as the years go on. So I agree with you there. The virtual effects, special effects, incredible.
Yeah, I think if we're going to talk about films that have amazing visual effects, I think you have to include this film in that conversation along with films like Jurassic Park or Aliens or Terminator 2, because that's the level that is on display in Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. Would you call this like a reboot or a prequel?
I think this has to be considered a reboot because it's too far removed from the events of the original film from in that timeline to be considered a remake. Now, the Tim Burton movie tried to do that, and that wasn't good. We'll certainly unpack some thoughts on that a little later in the episode. But it was nice to see the filmmakers kind of work backwards from the original film and kind of unpack the question, well, how did it go from Planet Earth to Planet of the Apes? Obviously, there's some sort of trajectory here, and it didn't happen overnight. So I think it was appropriate to go way back in time to the early 21st century and track that genesis.
Yeah. And it's cool how the events all unfold. You know, like one little thing, the killing of Caesar's mom, you know, leads to the baby, to finding, you know, it's just, and it's a snowball effect, essentially. The storytelling in this film, I think, is phenomenal. The writers, kudos to you guys who, let's say the screenwriters are freaking Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. Kudos to you in the direction from Wyatt, because the way that everything unfolds, it works out perfectly. Great storytelling.
Well, I mean, and I think I want to focus in on something you said, like one little thing. Think about how many movies we've talked about during this project that have come from one little thing. Like in the movie Her, it came from the development of this revolutionary AI. In Minority Report, it was the precogs who could predict murder and stop crime. And so many of these great stories have come from just this small little detail. And in this case, it's Caesar's mother being taken away and being killed in Genesis that really kind of kicks off this whole story.
Yeah. And because the parentage of Caesar is everything. We find out that she had a baby, his mom was killed, and they realize, oh my God, we just murdered this ape, not because she was reacting to the virus negatively, but because she was trying to protect her young, which was Caesar.
And I think this is something that comes up throughout the rest of the film. Like, would Caesar have been better off staying with his mother and staying at Genesis, or would he have been better off with Will?
That's a good question.
I mean, and I think, and I don't know like how people will land on this, but honestly, I think it was wrong for Will to hide Caesar's nature from himself. Like, it wasn't until Caesar was, you know, a grown adult chimpanzee and obviously intelligence off the charts. He had known for a long time just how smart Caesar was. And I think Will was very naive to think that a conversation like this about Caesar's mother or his real father wouldn't have come up at some point.
Yeah. Oh, well, the conversation you would have, I imagine, if you have an adopted child, I'm sure at some point. I was thinking about that too. What was it right for him to take Caesar, you know, to hide all that stuff? And I don't know. I think maybe he wanted to wait till he was older to explain it to him so he could get it. At least that was my thoughts. Which, the idea that a grown man is able to sign an entire conversation, like speak to a chimpanzee and the chimpanzee gets it, was pretty cool, man. I remember when they're sitting in that car, I was thinking, oh my God, Caesar's basically a human being at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for Will to recognize that this is still a chimpanzee. In spite of how intelligent he is, there's that little snippet when they're coming out of the woods where Caesar basically, you know, screams at a barking dog, and it's this reminder to us, and it should have been a reminder for Will that Caesar is capable of violence and flipping that switch when he needs to.
Yeah, instincts. You can never shut them off, and I think you're absolutely correct with that. It's interesting because when Caesar, several times throughout the film, it's crazy that we say exposing our humanity, you know. But it's Caesar, like when the grandfather gets attacked, when he's having an episode, the Alzheimer episode, Caesar ends up attacking, you know, the poor neighbor that keeps getting attacked. And then Caesar realizes what he's done, you know, and he goes to the grandfather and he realizes, oh my God. And then with the dog, he realizes that he was, you know, growling. I mean, every time it's interesting that Caesar like grows, you know, until the end when Caesar finally becomes like the most rational ape where he doesn't want to kill people. You know, he just wants to get them to the woods. So it's pretty interesting seeing his progression, you know, as a character.
Well, yeah, especially that scene where he does attack the neighbor and he's pulled out of it by Charles, and that look on his face. And again, gives you a glimpse into just how brilliant of an actor Andy Serkis is. That scene is so heartbreaking because it trains on Caesar for the longest time, and you could tell right away there's this huge look of sadness and regret and just this realization washing over him of, oh, my life is about to change.
Yeah. He just realized, oh my God, the ramifications for what I've done. You're right. That's such a good moment.
It's so heartbreaking, and this movie is just filled of all these little heartbreaking moments. Caesar having to go to the ape sanctuary, but I mean, for me especially, I mean, having a parent who does have a neurological disorder, like watching the scenes of Charles just slip back into Alzheimer's after years of thinking he would be okay is just, those were the absolute worst and just so gut-wrenching.
Yes, I agree. That, to me, it hit home for me as well, because I had a grandparent that struggled with it as well, and it's just, you just feel so sad for the guy, especially when he gets in the neighbor's car, and he's, he thinks it's his, and he goes forward and back. I mean, kudos to Lithgow, man, for doing such a great job. I think he nailed it. He really did, and it's just so heartbreaking to see that him confused, and he doesn't know what he's doing or why. And trying to explain, I was like, oh, poor old man.
I mean, I do love how dedicated Will is to helping his father and to cure his disease, but I mean, it's really his hubris and his arrogance into thinking I can cure this and I can stop nature or alter its course is ultimately like what kills his father. Because, like, oh man, I started losing it when Will is about to give him the improved the ALZ 113 and his father stops him. It just shakes his head no, like almost like no, like my suffering needs to end. This has gone on too long, and then the next morning he passes away. Oh, that was just it was like having your guts ripped out.
I know. He was done. He said, I'm done, It's okay. You can let me go. That's just so sad. But, I think he knew that his son would continue, and he wouldn't stop until, he would lose his own mind himself. And I think that's the ultimate sacrifice, knowing when to call it,
Right, and I totally agree. It's just, like, all these neurological disorders, ALS, Alzheimer's, Huntington, Parkinson's, these are absolutely beasts of diseases, and they wreak havoc among families. And as somebody who, like, could be genetically exposed to the disease that my mom has, it's like we're always hopeful that a cure or a treatment could be, coming along the pipe soon. And like, while there are advances, especially when it comes to genetic mapping, a cure is still a long ways away. But there's always things that people can try and do to maybe prevent the onslaught of it. Like, because there's so many different factors that go into whether or not you inherit a neurological disorder. It's, different genes that you inherit from your mother and your father. It's also where you grow up, but it's also how you live, like how much you exercise, how much you're stimulating your brain, how you eat. Literally everything could affect your brain's activity. And it's so important to stay active and to stay stimulated and hopefully stave off the effects of Alzheimer's.
Definitely. Do you think there'll ever be a cure? Like, would it actually happen? Would Big Pharma allow it?
It's difficult to say whether or not a cure would actually happen. I mean, I have to be hopeful that it would, but there's always the economics of illness, which as an American, I absolutely hate that phrase, because it's because you make more money from a sick person than you do from a healthy one. And I wish that attitude didn't exist. And I wish that treatments were available for Alzheimer's and Huntington's and Parkinson's, but there's just no real great long-term solutions for a disease like those.
It's tough. It's neurological diseases. That's something that we can't, like cancer you can cut out. of someone if you catch it early and then just continue to monitor and check up. But something like, Alzheimer's, that's tough. Parkinson's, it's just how much money has Michael J. Fox put in? I mean, it's tough.
Oh man, he's put in so much of his own money into treating himself.
Yeah, kudos to that man. I think he just retired too, like last year.
I mean, yeah, it's long overdue for him.
Yeah, that's true. So, on a better note, how did you think of California on this movie? I loved the redwoods. I think it was so beautiful.
I mean, yeah, the redwoods were great. I mean, this may be one of like the best looking like California films I've ever seen, because you never doubt for a moment that this isn't California that this movie's set in.
How many times do they show San Francisco? It's like, we get it. We're in San Fran.
It's like, here is the Golden Gate Bridge. Here's the Golden Gate Bridge again. Here are the redwoods. Oh, here are the redwoods again. Here's a fancy zoo that looks like it could be in California. Oh, by the way, and totally plausible, there could be a giant ape sanctuary somewhere nestled, on the outskirts of San Francisco.
Totally. I believed it. I was like, man, what if it could actually happen?
I mean, the only thing missing was like a stadium shot of a 49ers game or something.
You're right. Golden State Warriors. You're right.
Nah, maybe not the Warriors. They were still doo-doo stew at this time.
That is true. They were pretty hot garbage back in 2010, 2011. That is true.
But it was interesting how they actually filmed like a lot of those scenes, like especially on the Golden Gate Bridge, because they only had like, a small portion of it, and the entire set was basically surrounded by like blue or green screens, and then they would just expand the bridge in either direction in post-production, and it's awesome how they did all of that.
and it looked beautiful, though. I love that scene, that fight scene at the end. I guess the climax of the film, or the lowering action. I can't remember the theater terminologies, but that was such
it's
a cool
French word called denouement.
There we go. And that's such a good scene, especially when the villain gets his comeuppance, and he and Caesar's just like, screw you, man, I'm not going to help you up. So it was such a good scene.
This movie is really lucky in that it has two absolutely despicable villains. We got Dodge at the sanctuary and Jacobs, the CEO of Genesis. But, I mean, which one is the more, one you want to hate more?
Oh, my God. I'm going to tell you, both are just so lousy. Like, Jacobs, to me, his death was so satisfying, falling into the Black Hawk and begging the apes to save him after wanting to commercialize them. And despite, he treated them like animals. He had no regard for them at all. And he didn't care the outcomes of this virus that was unstable, which, I mean, I think if I had to go in, I would say it's Dodge Landon, just because he was such a dick for no reason to the apes, like Caesar squirting him, with the water. He was just such a dick. And then when Caesar would like make him look like a loser, he'd throw the stuff back in his face. Dodge finally ended up getting his comeuppance, getting electrocuted. So I think Dodge's death was very satisfying as well. I was like, I just can't wait till they kick his ass. How about you?
I mean, honestly, I think picking Dodge as the villain is sort of low-hanging fruit, because it's easy to kind of key in on the guy who's, a massive dick to innocent animals.
God.
That's just me. I mean, he's clearly dealing with some sort of inferiority complex and or daddy issues. And, I mean, granted, his death is immensely more satisfying than Jacob's, but I would have to go with Jacobs as, like, the true villain on the film. Because, like you were saying, he doesn't treat these animals like they have personalities or special traits about him. He treats them as lines on a spreadsheet, is what he does. They're not animals to him. They're property. They're things that he can manipulate for him. I mean, and all he can think about are profits. Every time we see him, he's talking about profits and making money. Like he even says to Will at one point, it's like you make science or whatever, I make money. and
I think
it's all profits. It's all money for him. And he coldly has the first group of chimps put down after Bright Eyes is killed at the beginning of the film. And at the end, he basically commandeers a police helicopter just so he can massacre Caesar's compatriots on the bridge there.
I know. That's why I can't pick him, because his character just goes so crazy. Like, he goes so left field from this guy that just wants to make money and takes precautions to what, the virus works? Mass marketed. Kill everyone. It's like, who is this man? What did he become? So I do think his death was pretty satisfying, though. He just got so crazy.
Well, it's
Like,
definitely
who is this?
having Jacobs as like the overarching villain is definitely kind of tapping into this sensibility that we all have about big pharma CEOs. It's like the villains, the real villains out there. I mean,
Yes.
now that we
Yes.
know, like Martin Shkreli, the pharma bro, is a total dirtbag, and also the Sackler family, and you know what they've done to make the opioid crisis worse. I mean,
God.
really, this is just kind of like it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's like, okay, there is a CEO out there who's experimenting on chips, and all he's thinking about is money, and will put these apes down the second anything goes wrong with them.
What a douchebag. I'm glad you're dead.
It was so great when Koba pushed that helicopter off the bridge, though.
Oh, hell yeah. And that's an ugly ape, but I feel like he's going to be very important in the future film. So I'm really pumped to see where the apes. It's like you almost end up cheering for the apes to win, you know? At least that's how I felt.
Well, yeah, and I think it's appropriate to cheer for the A's because you see just how despicable they're treated by Jacobs and Dodge. Yeah, you just see how awful they're treated throughout the film. So at the end of the day, yeah, you're rooting for Caesar or one of his friends to throw a metal spear through the animal control guy who's rounding up one of their friends.
Yeah. And honestly, it's when I was watching this, I'm like, I'm fully for them, because there's really no good people in this film outside of Charles, his son Will, and then Caroline. Those are literally the only three people that aren't deplorable in some aspects, and we don't really get to see Caroline too much. Like, we figure out she's a veterinarian, like working at the zoo, but I mean, that's it. She makes two moments, you know, to heal Caesar, and then when they find out that he's hurt. But I mean, and I guess she's there for the emotional with Will, where she kind of convinces him to tell Caesar about his parents. But I mean, her character kind of takes a side seat. But outside of those three, that's really it. The apes are just treated terribly by everyone.
Yeah, I mean, Will really doesn't find his sort of moral compass until near the end of the film. And even then, I don't think he's doing it out of any sort of like sense of protection. I think he's just doing it out of regret, because he's finally understanding exactly, you know, what his research has cost him. It's cost him his father, his relationship with Caroline is strained, and Caesar is no longer a part of his life. He just it's the weight of everything that he has accomplished, and I use that in air quotes there, you know, and then like, look where it's got him. He doesn't have his son, for lack of a better word for Caesar, because Caesar's not a pet, he's not a brother, he's his son. He doesn't have a parent, and everything is gone from his life.
Yeah. He loses it all. Which is, yeah.
And especially with Caroline, like, if you think about it, she's part of his life for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're romantically involved. She's basically Caesar's mom / doctor. Like, and I was just so surprised to see Frida Pinto's character just take such a backseat in this film and not really contribute much to Will's arc, at least his moral arc. If she was such a big part of his life, why wasn't she there more often to say, or for him to at least listen to her when she says, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this?
I think he just didn't want to hear it. He was so obsessed with finding the cure that it took the death of his father and seeing all the wreckage that he's caused to finally be like, oh yeah, you're right.
Well, this is that Pandora's box that I think all scientists need to be cognizant of. It's, yes, you are on the precipice of a great discovery, but are you really prepared to open that door and deal with the consequences once you do make this great leap forward?
Yeah, that's true. You should always be mindful of the outcomes. Progress is good, but it's got to be controlled. I agree. How did you think of so this film basically is building up to that moment where Caesar says, "No!" What did you think of that build to the arc, essentially?
I think it's hard not to think about the overall arc of the Planet of the Apes films. Like, when Caesar looks over Dodge and says, "No!" like, you cannot help but think of Charlton Heston at the end of the original film going, "You blew it up, damn you all to hell," and things like that. Like, it's like, that has to be present. Like, that singular moment of Caesar standing up for himself and his fellow apes and saying, "No, we are smarter than you, we're stronger than you, we're not going to be taking this." It's just, it all is going to lead down to, Charlton Heston or somebody's character like him sitting on a beach 3,000 years later and going, "You blew it up, damn you all."
It never gets old. Yeah, I agree. It's such a powerful moment when he talks. And then I love seeing Will's face when he realizes that Caesar talks to him. Oh, it was such a good line, too.
Caesar is home.
Yes. It was great. I couldn't believe. It was just the shock, but then the acceptance. Such a good movie. The ending is great. I mean, he finally lets go and lets him be free. And it's great as he sets his sights on San Francisco. So overall,
it doesn't even have like this villainous note to it. Like, you don't even, at no point in the movie do you think of the apes as villains. I mean, there is that moment with the several scenes with Rocket and Caesar where Rocket is trying to be the alpha of the group, but you also understand, like, Rocket isn't on the same level as Caesar. Caesar understands complex social constructs. Rocket just knows, "Hey, I'm the ape on top, Caesar isn't, and I'm going to show my dominance."
Yeah. So it takes that. But Caesar gets him in line.
Yeah, with a good old whack in the head with a jerry can.
Yeah, it works though. It works.
I mean, yes, I have found that, solidly hitting your adversaries in the head with a hard object usually gets them on your side.
Yes, I agree. And then once they see the muscle and that, this isn't a war that you're going to win, there's two choices at that point. All right, either join them or die.
I mean, yeah, and then just how the film ends too. Like, you see Caesar, like you said, looking out over San Francisco and realizing, yes, this will all be mine. But then the end credits start, and you see the pilot who was infected with the virus, and you see these ominous yellow lines spread all over the earth, and just the music by Patrick Doyle that plays over the credits, just like, oh man, it's all about to break off. People are gonna die.
And what a timely film too. God, I should have watched this in 2020.
All right, so yeah, we see the end credits there. People are gonna die. It's all gonna break off because of this virus. So with that in mind, Sean, did you have a red shirt?
My red shirt for this film. Oh, my red shirt for this film. What did I think? No, nothing crazy. I was like more of a, I don't know. It was almost like a yellow shirt in a way. And it's not that I just had compassion for the neighbor because he was a dick at first, right? And he was a dick to to Caesar because he was like, "What the hell is this ape doing in my backyard?" And then Caesar bites his finger. John Lithgow trashes his car. He ends up getting the virus sneezed all on him, so he's going to die. So the neighbor was actually my like red/yellow shirt because I can understand why he freaked out on Caesar, right? Because anyone would freak out with an ape near their children. But then it's just like how he ended up his whole life just took a turn for the worst. It's like at the end when he had the sneeze and the virus on him, he just looked so like downtrodden. I felt bad for him. So that was mine. How about you?
You know, I mean, in a movie that has animal deaths, you know I'm picking an animal as my red shirt. And I'm going to have to go with Buck, that big lowland gorilla that Caesar initially freed at the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And helps him get Rocket on board with Caesar's plan. And as soon as Caesar freed him from his cage there, Buck is just running around, living his best life, throwing balls around, and then he ultimately sacrifices himself, hurls himself at the police helicopter just so he can save Caesar, and has this heartbreaking death scene as Caesar is holding his hand. And it is like, oh, that was another gut punch in this movie.
I know. That was so sad too. It was. I couldn't believe it. You see this giant ass monkey being cradled, and I'm like, am I about to cry for the CGI gorilla? And I was really, I felt the feels because he sacrificed himself for the greater cause. So I like that. That's a good red shirt, man. Did you have any lens flares?
Oh, did I? And I think I yelled this out loud when I was watching it. So there's a scene right after Caesar rolls the ALZ-113 in the ape sanctuary, and he's leading them, I think, in like drill or instructions in the sanctuary. They're all in like these rows, and he's leading them through chants or whatever. And you see Brian Cox's character look out the window into the sanctuary, and he sees them all lined up, looks at them, looks at Caesar, and the apes all walk away. And then Brian Cox just walks away like nothing's wrong. Like you just saw all your apes in this sanctuary clearly planning something, and you just walk away like it's another Tuesday.
Yeah, I feel the same with that. That was mine too. It was like, what human would see this and be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, this would be like if dogs were planning to start walking us. You know, like, come on.
It just shows the ego of Brian Cox's character. He felt he was so safe in his sanctuary.
Well, it was false sanctuary.
Yeah.
Well, that was what bothered us. But do you want to know what bothered the internet in this week in toxic fandom?
Oh, please bring it on, man.
Oh man, there were so many to choose from. It was hard, but I found this one because, you know, we talked about Dodge being killed earlier. So, Dodge Landon is electrocuted in a dramatic shower of sparks when he's sprayed with the water hose while holding an electric cattle prod. This is pure nonsense. There is nowhere near enough power contained within this battery-powered device to electrocute somebody.
Fair.
It's like, well, Dodge had to die in some way, and that was probably the most satisfying way to do it. So if you have an issue, take it up with the writers. It's
fair enough. They're just mad. There's always got to be people pissed off at something.
We have never encountered a movie where people were like, oh, yeah, this is great. No issues. Plot holes? What plot holes? I don't care about the plot holes. Nope. Everybody's got something to complain about, and they always take it to the internet.
Exactly. Always. I mean, I saw somewhere, I mean, I did agree, you know, like one was no respectable scientist working on a drug who would recommend starting human trials based on a single chimp showing improvement. No respectable head of a biotech company would even consider presenting the idea to its board either. So, from a research background, that is correct. Because I remember when this film started, I was like, what? No? But it is a good find. That is a good finding to have like a single improvement. But you would want to replicate that study a multitude of times. Maybe the company sucked. You know, and we saw that they did. So They
Yeah,
ended.
well, their CEO was pushed off of a bridge in a police helicopter after he tried murdering a bunch of chimpanzees. So, yeah, there you go.
They suck. The company sucks. That's why. And they just caused basically worldwide extinction with this stupid virus. So they weren't respectable at all. I agree with you, Toxic Fandom. I agree.
I know, you're just looking at this company being like, look what you did, you little jerk.
Yes. Yes. So, with this film, let's talk about the legacy. Like you've done the Charlton Heston quotes. I said Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch was in '01. How did it do in the movie theaters? This grossed a lot of money, I feel like.
You know, it did gross a lot of money. It grossed almost $482 million, but oddly enough, that didn't even crack the top 10 of highest grossing films that year, because this was 2011. The highest grossing film that year was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, because it just couldn't be contained into Part 1. And that grossed like $1.2 billion. So, yeah, there was no way it was anywhere near the top 10 with that. But it was, oh, God, it was so well received at the time. And it came out in August. So there's a noticeable lull in blockbusters that come out in August. It's usually like garbage films. Everybody's waiting for award season and those movies to come out. But, man, critics absolutely loved this movie. It's got an 82% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 68 on Metacritic, and even the late great Roger Ebert was a fan of the film because he gave it 3 out of 4 stars.
Hey, there we go. So people loved it, and it got a Best Visual Effects nomination in the Oscars, the 84th Academy Awards. So that's something.
Yeah, but do you want to know what it lost to?
What?
Hugo.
Ah, well, I guess. I mean, have you talked about Hugo? Have you mentioned it? Or
No, I am I am not a fan of that movie.
Okay.
To me, if somebody's head isn't exploding or there's massive gun violence, to me it's not a Martin Scorsese movie.
That's right. That is a Martin Scorsese. He just wanted to take a different direction. Well, all right. Thanks a lot, Hugo.
But it did win big at the Saturn Awards that year. It was nominated for 5 awards, and it ended up winning for Best Sci-Fi Film, Best Supporting Actor for Andy Serkis, and Best Special Effects. Was also nominated for Best Director and Best Writing. So it did take home big at the Saturn Awards.
Well deserved. Andy Serkis deserves it, man. I don't know how he hasn't been nominated for an Oscar. I think the Academy is really missing out, and this is my little soapbox. I think it's garbage, trash, that they will not nominate someone that does CGI performances. That's lousy. He's done hell of a job in freaking The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and this freaking movie, and yet we're not getting any of it. He deserves it. I think he deserves it, and he's well overdue for a freaking Oscar, so get on it, Academy Awards. It's nonsense. Off a soapbox.
Hey, you let me have my rant at the end of A Quiet Place Part 2, so you get your rant for Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
True. And there will be more Planet of the Apes, because there are sequels.
Oh, yeah, this got 2 new sequels. This was a whole reboot trilogy, and we've got a special surprise we're planning for the end of this episode that we're going to announce regarding those 2 movies. So I think now this is the best time to kind of talk about, I think, we both grew up, we both have memories of the Tim Burton remake that came out, I think it was like 2001. So, like, did your memories of that movie kind of cloud or maybe made you skeptical of Rise of the Planet of the Apes when it was going to come out?
Yeah, I was just like, do I really want to see a bunch of guys in costumes running around again? Like, I just felt kind of confused and not really and intrigued to see it, because I was like, Marky Mark's wasn't that good. So, I mean, it looked cool. Great set design and everything by Tim Burton as usual, but the story just kind of was like, meh. So I didn't really care for it. But now I've been so far removed. So watching this, I was more curious. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, like, how good this movie is totally just washes away just how bad the Tim Burton remake was. Yeah. And it always amazes me that people thought that a remake of a classic science fiction film like Planet of the Apes was a good idea.
Yeah.
Because it's just and now we can say in hindsight that it wasn't. It's like trying to make a sequel for Speed. It didn't work out. That remake didn't work out. It's just leave these classic science fiction films alone. They're a classic for a reason. Don't touch them. Don't remake them. Don't add a new spin on them. Either reboot it and try to make your own thing, or just leave it alone. It's very simple.
Exactly. Just stop. It's like rebooting Blade Runner. Leave it alone.
So I think on that note, I think this is a good point to jump into our rating. So on our unique scale for the podcast of wouldn't watch, would own, and would host a viewing party, what do you give to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Sean?
For this film, I would put it as a would host a viewing party. I think Planet of the Apes is great. Rise of the Planet of the Apes is great. It got me. It's just such a refreshing film, especially now, to look back in 10 years and how well it's aged, the direction, the writing, the acting. It's just, to me, it's perplexing to see a film about a CGI ape and then really be rooting for it and fall for it. And to me, that's where I say the director and the writers have got you, because if you can suspend your belief for that much and root for this guy, the underdog, and want him to dethrone humanity and go against the people, your own species, I think that's a win. And I think Andy Serkis, like I said before, is a hell of an actor. All of them did a great job. So to me, host a viewing party all day, brother. How about you?
You know, I'm going to start off my review by saying I think the hardest thing that Hollywood can do is find a way to reinvent a franchise and do it successfully. And I think Rise of the Planet of the Apes manages to do that in spades. You manage to root for the apes at every turn in the movie. You sympathize with Caesar throughout his journey. You do question Will's motivations and moral compass, but eventually he does come around, and we like him as a character. It has heartbreaking moments. It's got tense moments. The visual effects are fantastic and will hold up as long as visual effects are talked about in movies. It's a great story, brilliant production design. So I'm going to be right in agreement with you. I think this is a would host a viewing party all day, every day.
Amen. Sweet. I love it that we're in agreement. So, which I guess now we can talk, since we love this film so much. All right, guys, we're gonna review the rest of the series. We're doing it all, man.
Yeah, Sean and I were talking just how much we enjoyed watching this movie so much, and yeah, I think we haven't done a nice little suite of episodes in a while. So our next episode and the one after that, we're gonna be diving into the rest of the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy. So next time we're bringing you Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Joel. Was it Joe Clark or whatever his name is? He's got an Australian name, I don't know. And also Andy Serkis is back as Caesar. So, and then we'll round it out with War for the Planet of the Apes. So we got 2 banger movies coming out into the podcast feed soon, and we are super excited to talk about those movies. And Sean, thank you so much for talking about this episode with me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, Chris. You are the man, as always. I'm pumped. Talk about Dawn and start this new trilogy, this nice reboot series. So I'm pumped. I hope y'all enjoyed it that are listening to it, and tune in to us because there's more content to come.
Absolutely. So that's going to wrap it up on this edition of the Force-Fed Sci-Fi Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, and we hope you did, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. That really is the best place to do it, and it really helps other people like you find the show. We are across the spectrum of social media with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at ForceFed Sci-Fi. Please check out and download episodes from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. And do us a favor, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Finally, you can check out our website, forcefedsci-fi.com for show notes and links to all of the social media. So for all of us at the Force Fed Sci-Fi team, we'll see you next time.